The sun beat down on the parched earth of Arizona, a relentless furnace that seemed to bake the very life out of the land. Dust devils danced in lazy spirals across the desolate plains, and the air shimmered with heat. Sarah Jenkins, her face etched with a weariness that went beyond mere physical exertion, squinted at the horizon. The Jenkins Ranch, a meager spread of weathered wood and hopeful fences, lay behind her, a testament to a dream slowly eroding under the harsh realities of the frontier. Her husband, John, had been a good man, a hard worker, but the unforgiving nature of the land and a cruel twist of fate had claimed him a year prior. Now, Sarah was alone, burdened with the ranch, a dwindling supply of supplies, and a gnawing fear that whispered of ruin. She adjusted the worn brim of her hat, the coarse fabric a familiar, comforting weight against her skin. The silence was immense, broken only by the creak of her saddle and the distant cry of a hawk. As she rode, her gaze fell upon a lone figure silhouetted against the vast expanse of blue. It was a woman, her dark hair braided and her buckskin dress blending almost seamlessly with the arid landscape. An Apache woman. Sarah's heart gave a nervous flutter. Encounters with the local tribes were always fraught with an unspoken tension, a legacy of conflict and mistrust. Yet, there was something in the woman's posture, a stillness that spoke not of aggression, but of a quiet strength. The Apache woman turned, her eyes, dark and intelligent, meeting Sarah's. There was no hostility, only a profound sense of observation. Sarah hesitated, then spurred her horse forward, a sense of inexplicable pull guiding her. As she drew closer, she saw the woman was young, perhaps no older than herself, and her face, though beautiful, carried a deep sadness. "Greetings," Sarah offered, her voice raspy from disuse and the dry air. The Apache woman inclined her head slightly. "The wind carries your loneliness," she said, her voice a low, melodic murmur, surprisingly clear. Sarah's breath hitched. You speak English?" Some words, enough to hear the sorrow in the heart. The woman gestured with a slender hand towards the distant hazy mountains. "My name is Anya. Sarah Jenkins." Sarah dismounted, her legs stiff. I am grateful for the company, Anya. The solitude can be heavy." Anya nodded, her gaze sweeping over Sarah's worn clothing, her tired eyes. "Your burden is heavy, Sarah Jenkins. The land takes much, but it also gives if one knows where to look." They stood in silence for a moment, the vastness of the landscape dwarfing them both. Sarah felt a strange kinship with this woman, a shared understanding that transcended their different worlds. Anya's presence was a balm to her aching soul, a flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. Is there someone you seek?" Sarah finally asked, the question hanging in the air. Anya's dark eyes held a flicker of pain. "I seek a path, and perhaps a hand to guide me when the path is lost." The words resonated deeply with Sarah. She too felt lost, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. In that shared vulnerability, a fragile connection began to form, a silent acknowledgement of their mutual need. The sun continued its descent, casting long shadows that stretched across the land, a prelude to the coming night and a new beginning for two women who found each other on the edge of the wild frontier. The air in the saloon hung thick with the stench of cheap whiskey, stale sweat, and desperation. Outside, the dusty streets of Redemption, a town that seemed to mock its own name with its lawlessness, were alive with the usual cacophony of brawling cowboys, hurried merchants, and the mournful wail of a saloon piano. Inside, however, a different kind of tension simmered. Silas Blackwood, a man whose stern features and steely gaze had carved a reputation as formidable as the mountains that ringed his vast cattle empire, sat at a table, nursing a drink. His coat was of fine wool, his boots polished to a gleam, a stark contrast to the rough-hewn patrons around him. He was a man of power, of influence, and lately, of deep disquiet. Word had reached him, carried on the wind, and by hushed whispers from his scouts, of a woman, an Apache, seeking aid. Anya. The name itself was a curiosity, a deviation from the usual conflict and avoidance. He was a pragmatist, a man who dealt in land, cattle, and the often brutal realities of survival. Yet this tale stirred something in him, a flicker of an old, almost forgotten chivalry. His foreman, a gruff, weathered man named Jed, approached, his boots thudding heavily on the wooden floor. "Boss," he said, his voice low, "that woman Anya, she was asking about work, said she could handle a horse." Silas grunted, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Handle a horse, eh? Most Apache women are good with horses. What else did she say?" "Not much, just that she needed a place. And she ain't alone. She's with another woman, a white woman looks like, skinny, worn down. From the looks of her, she's got nothing." Silas's brow furrowed. A white woman with an Apache woman, both seeking work on his ranch. It was an unusual pairing, bordering on the scandalous in these parts. But the description of the white woman, worn down, nothing, struck a chord. He had seen that look before, the look of a soul teetering on the brink. "What's her name?" Silas asked. "Jenkins. Sarah Jenkins. Says she's got a small ranch, but it's not much anymore. Husband died. Sarah Jenkins." The name was unfamiliar, yet the plight was a common one. The frontier was littered with the remnants of shattered dreams and broken lives. Silas took a long drink. He was a man who valued strength, resilience, and loyalty. He had no patience for weakness, yet he also understood the value of a helping hand, a concept often lost in the pursuit of self-preservation. "Bring them in, Jed," Silas said, his voice firm. "I'll speak to them, and Jed," he added, his eyes narrowing, "keep your eyes open. This is a rough territory. We don't need any trouble." Jed nodded, a grim satisfaction on his face. He respected Silas Blackwood, and he knew that when Silas made a decision, it was usually for a reason, even if that reason wasn't immediately apparent to others. As Jed turned to leave, Silas looked out the grimy window, his gaze fixed on the dusty street. He was a man who rarely made exceptions, but something about this situation, the unusual alliance, the desperation in their eyes, drew him in. He was about to offer a lifeline, but he also knew that offering a hand on the frontier often came with unforeseen consequences. The Jenkins Ranch was a ghost of its former self, the paint peeled from the cabin walls like sunburnt skin, and the fence posts sagged precariously, leaning against the relentless wind. Inside, the air was cool and still, a welcome respite from the searing heat, but it carried the faint scent of decay and forgotten dreams. Sarah moved through the small space, her movements heavy with exhaustion. Anya sat by the hearth, her back straight, her gaze steady, a silent sentinel. They had spoken little since their meeting on the plains, yet a bond had solidified between them. Anya's quiet strength was a source of comfort, her mere presence a bulwark against Sarah's rising despair. Sarah, in turn, found herself drawn to Anya's unwavering composure, her ability to find beauty and meaning even in the harshest of circumstances. Suddenly, the sound of approaching horses broke the stillness. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat. She hadn't expected anyone, especially not the powerful Silas Blackwood, whose sprawling ranch dominated the region. He was a legend, a man spoken of with a mixture of awe and fear. Jed, Silas's foreman, a man with a face like a weathered oak, dismounted first. He was followed by Silas himself, his tall, imposing figure exuding an aura of authority. Sarah felt a surge of nervousness, her hand instinctively going to the worn handle of the rifle leaning against the wall. Anya, however, remained seated, her gaze calm and unwavering. Silas Blackwood dismounted, his movements economical and precise. He surveyed the dilapidated ranch with a critical eye, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said, his voice a deep rumble, "I received word you were in need of assistance." Sarah found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "Mr. Blackwood, Yes, my husband, he passed on. And the ranch. It's been difficult. Silas's gaze shifted to Anya, who met his stare with an unblinking intensity. And you are? Anya, she replied, her voice clear and steady. I am with Mrs. Jenkins. Silas's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise in their depths. He had expected to find a woman alone and desperate, not one accompanied by an Apache woman. I am offering work, Mrs. Jenkins, he stated, his tone businesslike. Work on my ranch. Good pay, steady work. We need hands, especially hands that know how to handle horses. His gaze lingered on Anya for a moment longer. Sarah looked at Anya, a silent question passing between them. This was an opportunity, a lifeline. But it meant leaving the only home she had ever known, the land her husband had loved. It meant entering the employ of a man who, despite his reputation for fairness, was still a stranger. I don't know, Sarah stammered, her mind racing. We have this place. Anya placed a hand on Sarah's arm, her touch surprisingly firm. The land here is tired, Sarah, and so are you. Sometimes a new path is the only way to find strength. Sarah looked at Anya, her dark eyes full of a quiet wisdom. Anya was right. The ranch was failing, a constant reminder of her loss and her struggle. Silas Blackwood's offer, as daunting as it was, represented a chance to survive, to perhaps even thrive. I accept, Mr. Blackwood, Sarah said, her voice gaining a newfound firmness. We will come to your ranch. Silas gave a curt nod, a faint hint of approval in his expression. Jed will escort you. He will show you where to stay. You'll start tomorrow. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the two women, a man who understood the precariousness of life on the frontier. This is a harsh land. You'll need to be strong, both of you. With that, he mounted his horse, turned, and rode away, leaving Sarah and Anya with the promise of a new, uncertain future. The Blackwood Ranch was a sprawling testament to Silas Blackwood's success. Rolling hills covered in emerald green grass stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with herds of sturdy cattle. The main ranch house was a grand structure of dark wood, built to withstand the elements and project an air of prosperity. It was a stark contrast to the meager existence Sarah had known. Jed, Silas's foreman, led them to a small, sturdy bunkhouse, clean and simply furnished. This is your place, he said, his tone gruff but not unkind. Mr. Blackwood wants you to be comfortable. You start work at sunup. Anya, you'll be helping with the horses. Mrs. Jenkins, you'll be helping in the kitchen and with laundry. We got a cook, but she could use a hand, especially with the extra hands we got in. Sarah nodded, taking it all in. The bunkhouse was modest, but it was clean, and there was a sturdy cot for each of them. Anya, true to her nature, seemed to take it all in stride, her eyes taking in the details of their new surroundings with quiet observation. The next morning, the ranch came alive with a purposeful energy. Cowboys moved with practiced efficiency, their shouts and the lowing of cattle creating a symphony of ranch life. Sarah found herself in the bustling kitchen, where a stout, good-natured woman named Martha presided. Martha, a widow herself, took Sarah under her wing, showing her the ropes of preparing meals for a large crew, the sheer scale of it initially overwhelming. Anya, meanwhile, was in her element in the stables. Her hands, which Sarah had thought were only capable of the delicate tasks of tending to plants, moved with a surprising strength and grace as she groomed the horses, her voice a soft murmur as she spoke to them. The animals seemed to respond to her, nuzzling her hand, their large eyes soft. Silas Blackwood was a distant figure, often seen on horseback, overseeing his vast domain, his presence a constant reminder of the man in charge. He rarely interacted with the hands, but Sarah noticed his sharp, intelligent gaze would occasionally sweep over the ranch, taking in every detail. He was a man who demanded respect and got it. Days turned into weeks. Sarah, despite the grueling work, found a rhythm. The constant activity, the shared meals with the other ranch hands, and Martha's kind company were a welcome distraction from her grief and loneliness. She learned to chop wood, to mend fences, and to find satisfaction in a day's hard work. Anya, too, seemed to thrive. She proved to be an exceptional horsewoman, her understanding of the animals almost intuitive. One evening, as Sarah sat on the porch of the bunkhouse, watching the stars begin to pepper the darkening sky, Silas rode by. He reined in his horse, his gaze lingering on her. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said, his voice even, "you're doing good work. Martha tells me you're a fast learner." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I appreciate the opportunity." He nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "This land, it tests you, but it also rewards those who have the grit to stay." He paused, his gaze returning to her. "I see a strength in you, Mrs. Jenkins. Don't let this land break you." His words, simple yet profound, struck a chord. Sarah realized that Silas Blackwood, despite his gruff exterior, saw something in her, something she was only beginning to rediscover in herself. As he rode off into the night, Sarah felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a quiet resolve to prove him and herself right. The Blackwood Ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was becoming a place of possibility. The harmony of the Blackwood Ranch was a fragile thing, easily disrupted by the harsh realities of the frontier. One sweltering afternoon, as Sarah was helping Martha hang laundry, a cloud of dust announced the arrival of unwanted visitors. A group of rough-looking men, their faces hardened by the sun and their clothes travel-stained, rode into the ranch yard, their horses lathered. Leading them was a man with a scar running down his cheek, his eyes sharp and predatory. Silas Blackwood emerged from the main house, his expression hardening as he recognized the leader. "Cain," Silas said, his voice low and dangerous, "what brings you to my ranch?" Cain, the man with the scar, dismounted with a swagger. "Just passing through, Silas. Heard you were hiring, always looking for good men." His gaze, however, swept over the ranch with an appraising, almost covetous look. Jed and several other ranch hands moved closer, their hands hovering near their holstered revolvers. The air crackled with unspoken threat. Sarah felt a knot of fear tighten in her stomach. She had heard whispers of Cain and his gang, a group known for their ruthlessness, their willingness to take what they wanted by force. "We're not hiring," Silas replied, his voice cutting like ice. "And you're not welcome here, Cain. Move along." Cain laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Always so welcoming, Silas. You forget this land. It belongs to no one and everyone." His eyes fell on Anya, who stood near the stables, her gaze steady. A lecherous grin spread across his face. "Well, now, what have we here? A pretty little Apache maid? Silas, you always did have a knack for collecting the finest treasures." Anya's eyes flashed, but she remained silent, her posture radiating a quiet defiance. Sarah felt a surge of protectiveness. Anya had become more than just a companion. She was a friend. "Leave her be, Cain," Silas warned, his voice dangerously low. "She's under my protection." Cain sneered. "Protection? From what? A bit of friendly attention? Come on, Silas, don't tell me you're getting soft." He took a step towards Anya. Before Silas could react, Jed moved, his hand a blur as he drew his revolver. "Get back, Cain," Jed growled, his voice a low threat. Cain halted, his eyes narrowing as he met Jed's determined gaze. He knew Jed was a formidable opponent. He also knew Silas Blackwood wouldn't back down. He was outnumbered, and the odds were not in his favor. "This ain't over, Silas," Cain spat, his eyes filled with malice. "This land, it'll be mine one day." He turned his horse, his men following suit, disappearing into the dust they had created. The tension slowly dissipated, but the unease remained. Sarah looked at Anya, her face pale but composed. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice hushed. Anya met her gaze, a flicker of gratitude in her dark eyes. "Yes, Sarah. Thank you." She then looked towards Silas, who had watched the entire exchange with a grim expression. "Mr. Blackwood, you have defended us." Silas gave a curt nod. "This is my ranch, Anya, and my responsibility. Cain is a snake. He'll be back." His gaze hardened, a steely resolve settling on his features. "But we'll be ready for him." The peace they had found was clearly under threat, and the shadow of the past, embodied by Cain, loomed large over the Blackwood Ranch. The encounter with Cain and his men had cast a long shadow over the Blackwood Ranch, but it had also, in a strange way, forged stronger bonds. Sarah, Anya, and Silas found themselves drawn closer by the shared threat. Sarah discovered a resilience she never knew she possessed, her initial fear giving way to a steely determination to protect her newfound home and friends. Anya, too, showed a quiet strength, her knowledge of the land and her keen senses proving invaluable. Silas, a man accustomed to solitude and self-reliance, found himself relying more on his ranch hands, particularly on Jed's unwavering loyalty and Sarah and Anya's quiet competence. He began to see them not just as hired help, but as integral parts of his ranch. He found himself sharing more with Sarah, drawn to her quiet wisdom and her unwavering spirit. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the main house, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and stew, Silas spoke of his past. He spoke of the harshness of his own youth, of building the ranch from nothing, of the sacrifices he had made. Sarah listened, her heart aching for the man beneath the hardened exterior. She shared her own story, the loss of John, the struggle to keep the ranch afloat, the fear that had consumed her. Anya, in turn, spoke of her tribe, of their traditions, and of the increasing pressure from encroaching settlers. "Cain is a symptom of a larger problem," Anya said softly, her voice carrying a hint of sadness. "The land is changing, and not always for the better." "He won't stop," Silas said, his jaw tight. "He sees this as an opportunity. Easy pickings. But he underestimates this ranch, and he underestimates the people who work here." His gaze met Sarah's, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something akin to vulnerability in his eyes. The next few weeks were tense. Silas increased security, doubling the patrols and reinforcing the fences. Jed trained the hands in defensive tactics, his gruff demeanor laced with a grim determination. Sarah found herself helping to organize supplies, her organizational skills proving unexpectedly useful. Anya spent her days scouting the perimeter, her knowledge of the terrain and her ability to move unseen a significant advantage. One crisp morning, Anya returned from a scouting mission, her face grim. "They're back," she announced, her voice low. "A larger group this time. They're heading this way." A palpable sense of dread filled the air, but it was quickly replaced by a resolute calm. Silas, his face set in a mask of determination, addressed his people. "We stand together," he declared, his voice ringing with authority. "We defend this ranch. We defend each other." The women of the ranch were moved to the safety of the main house, armed with rifles and a shared sense of purpose. Sarah, her hands trembling slightly but her resolve firm, stood by Anya at a window, watching the approaching dust cloud. They were ready. Bonds forged in the quiet days of shared labor were now being tested in the crucible of shared danger. This was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting what they had built together. The dust cloud resolved into Cain's menacing band of riders. Silas Blackwood and his men stood ready, a defiant line against the encroaching threat. "Give us what we want, and no one has to get hurt," Cain roared. "This land is ours, and we'll defend it," Silas replied, his voice unwavering. The first shots shattered the morning stillness. The ranch hands and Apache warriors returned fire with disciplined precision. Sarah and Anya, watching from the main house, gripped their rifles with fierce resolve. Sarah saw Anya's focused movements, providing cover fire, her aim steady despite the chaos. Sarah, though her hands trembled, found her own aim true, taking down a rider who strayed too close. The battle raged, a desperate struggle. Silas, a formidable presence, inspired his men. Jed was a whirlwind of action, his shotgun spitting fire. Cain, furious at the resistance, pressed his attack, but the defenders fought with the ferocity of those protecting their home. Anya, with a group of Apache warriors, launched a daring flank attack, sowing confusion. As the sun climbed, Cain's men started to falter. Their bravado turned to a panicked retreat. "This isn't over!" Cain screamed, his face contorted with rage, before he and his remaining men disappeared into the plains. Silence descended, broken only by the groans of the wounded. The defenders of Blackwood Ranch stood, battered but victorious. Sarah and Anya exchanged a weary but triumphant smile. In the aftermath, a new understanding had been forged. They had faced the darkness and emerged unbroken. The air now carried the somber scent of healing. The Blackwood Ranch, though scarred, stood resilient. The fallen were mourned, the wounded tended to. Sarah worked tirelessly alongside Martha, a raw camaraderie born from their shared ordeal. Silas, visibly weary, moved with a renewed purpose, personally overseeing the tending of the wounded. Anya, her heritage now a source of respect, moved among them, her knowledge of medicinal herbs proving invaluable. "Cain will return," Silas stated to Sarah as they stood on the porch. "But we stood together, Silas. We showed him we won't be driven out," Sarah replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Silas turned to her, his eyes holding a look of quiet admiration. "You've proven yourselves to be as strong as any man on this ranch." Later that day, Silas called a meeting of everyone who had fought. He stood before them, his voice resonating with sincerity. "We faced a grave threat, and we faced it as one. The bravery shown today by every man and woman here has earned my deepest respect. This ranch, it is a better place because you are here." A quiet murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. The Blackwood Ranch was now a community, bound by shared hardship and mutual respect. The reckoning with Cain was yet to come, but for now, a fragile peace had settled over the ranch. The dust had settled, and the Blackwood Ranch buzzed with new energy. Silas, his gaze more open, initiated a period of rebuilding and strengthening. Sarah, her confidence solidified, found herself taking on more responsibility. She worked closely with Silas, their working relationship evolving into a deep, unspoken trust. Anya became a bridge between the growing community and the Apache people, ensuring their traditions would not be lost. Her bond with Sarah remained strong, their quiet conversations a source of comfort. One evening, as Silas and Sarah sat on the porch, Silas spoke of the future. "This land needs more than just defense. It needs growth, prosperity. I want to expand." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's a big undertaking, Silas. I believe it's possible, and I believe you can help me make it happen," he said, his gaze steady. "You have a good head for business, Sarah." A thrill shot through Sarah. This was an opportunity to build something larger than herself. I would be honored to help, Silas," she said, her voice firm. News arrived that Cain and his men had been apprehended. It was a victory not just for the Blackwood Ranch, but for the fragile peace taking root. As the sun began its descent, Silas and Sarah stood side by side. The Blackwood Ranch, once a symbol of solitary ambition, was now a testament to the power of unity and the quiet strength found in unexpected alliances. The unwritten horizon beckoned, and they were ready to face it. Together, their hearts filled with the quiet strength of a new beginning.